Hello, my name is Michele, and you're listening to Profit is a Choice. With us on the podcast today is Jeremy Miner. Jeremy is the chairman of Seventh Level, a global sales training company. Jeremy shares with us today that the single most effective way to sell anything to anyone in 2022 is to be a problem finder and a problem solver, not a product pusher. We'll discuss this and why the old ways of selling no longer work well. Every day, empowered entrepreneurs are taking ownership of their company financial health and enjoying the rewards of reduced stress and more creativity. With my background as a financial software developer, owner of multiple businesses in the interior design industry, educator, and speaker, I coach women in the interior design industry to increase their profits, regain ownership of their bottom line, and to have fun again in their business. Welcome to Profit is a Choice. Hi, Jeremy. Welcome to the podcast.
Michele, thank you. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. This is going to be exciting. So I'm excited to have this conversation with you to see what we can do for your audience.
Yeah, I was excited when your information came over. I get a lot of pitches, which you have a podcast as well. So I'm sure you get a lot of pitches.
Sure.
And I take a very small percentage of what is pitched to me because I want to make sure that it aligns with not only my company and values, but also what we put out there. And so there's a lot of, I'm just going to say, ickiness around some of the sales pitches that I get or anything that has to do with sales. And yours stood out to be so very different. And so that's what makes me excited.
I have to ask, what was the difference?
Yeah, I think, well, a couple of the things. One of the things that you mentioned was about not doing it the way everybody else did it. You talked about, which I don't like, you talked about communicating and being cautious and not just looking at where they were going to object, but actually building things in. And I get that part of it is the normal sales process.
Sure.
There was just something about the messaging, but the way it came across, it felt relational and real and not ick and slimy and salesy. And I think that's important, right?
I mean, it's, well, like I said, if you want to be, because I know a lot of people, on your show are entrepreneurs, they're interior designers, right? They might have their own store, their own service, right? So if you want to get your prospects to view you as like the expert or the trusted authority that's going to get them the results they want, you can't have them view you as just some salesperson that's trying to stuff your solution down their throat. I mean, that's what average salespeople do. That's what average business owners do in our day and age, the year 2022 we're in. So if you want to be great at persuasion, at selling, you have to start looking and viewing your business or sales as collaborative. It's you working with the prospect to help them find problems that maybe they didn't even know they had. Because most of the time when we're starting to talk to a prospect, as you know, they don't really know what their real problems are, right? They don't know what they don't know, right? They don't know what they need, right? Or maybe they do know they have a problem, but they don't know how bad that problem is. Or maybe they don't understand the consequences of what will happen if they don't do anything about solving the problem. Now, once you learn the right questioning skills, okay, once you learn how to get prospects to pull you in, you learn how to work with human behavior. Not only are you able to help your prospects find that maybe they thought they had one problem, but now you're able to help them find that they really have 2 or 3 or 4 other problems they didn't know they had. And when you're able to pull that out of them, how do they view you? They view you as the expert, right? The authority with what you're offering. Whereas they view everybody else, they kind of get rid of them over here in the corner and commoditize them and just view them as somebody trying to sell them something. So you have to view selling as collaboration, whereas so many people out there have been taught that selling is more adversarial, like you against the prospect, trying to win them over, manipulate them so you can make money. If you sell like that, in the information age we are in right now, you are going to be very average at best at business and selling for sure.
Absolutely. Before we jump in anymore, Jeremy, if you would take just a minute and share a little bit of your background and what brought you to the point of seeing this as a different way and doing things differently. Because I'm sure that if you went through any type of normal sales process, you were taught, the more adversarial way, as opposed to kind of the view that we're on the same side of the table trying to solve a problem. Are we meant to work together to solve that problem?
Background, I don't want to bore everybody, but I got into sales when I was, I think I just barely turned 22. I think I was a junior in college, and I had no money, completely broke. And one of my buddies said, "Hey, there's this job opportunity you can go to tonight. They've even got free pizza." And as a broke college kid, you're like, okay, free food, I'm in. And I remember there was like 100 of us there at this recruiting meeting. And they're like, "Hey, you can go out in the summers and you can sell these alarm systems door to door, and you can make enough money in the summer where you don't have to work the rest of the year." And I'm like, that's perfect. I'll just go make a bunch of money and then I can focus on my schoolwork. My degree I was studying was behavioral science and human psychology, which it's led to me where I'm at right now. But I remember going out there, they took us out in a van, dropped us off in a neighborhood, a not so safe neighborhood, and basically said, "Hey, go make some sales. We'll pick you up after dark." Okay. They gave us a script. Here's a couple of books like a week before we went. I'm reading all this. And I go out there and I thought selling was going to be easy because that's what everybody told me. And so when I knocked on the door, I noticed very quickly from the very first door that I got a lot of objections. "We don't need it. We already have somebody for that. We would never use that. We're good. We're not interested. We're interested, but now's not a good time. Can you call me back in a week, a month, a year later?" Right? Has anybody ever heard any of those type of objections? "I want to think it over. I need to talk to my spouse," right? And I'm like, blah, 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 blah. And it got to a point after going through all of that rejection for about 7-8 weeks straight, barely making any sales. Now realize door-to-door sales, straight commission. It's not like you get some salary, and if you don't make many sales, you're okay. I made $0 for weeks. Okay. So I remember sitting on a curb one night. It was after a week of not making any sales. So I'd worked like 60 hours that week. I made $0. Let me repeat that. 60 hours, $0. I would have been better off working at McDonald's for minimum wage. Okay. So I remember sitting there, like standing, and the manager is about to pick me up in the van to take me back. It's like 10 o'clock at night. I'm like drenched in sweat. This is in like the middle of June in the Midwest. It's really hot. And I remember sitting there like, what am I going to do? Like I just gotten married at that time. I had a child on the way. And I'm like, how am I going to go tell my new wife, like, what am I going to tell her that we don't have enough money to pay rent here next month? Oh, by the way, we're probably going to have to move in with your parents. I was going to be that guy. And I remember thinking to myself that, maybe selling just wasn't for me, right? Has anybody ever heard, thought that when you're like going through the hard times, you're like, oh my gosh, why I've had this great product or service, nobody wants to buy it. And I remember I got picked up that night by the sales manager, and he popped in a Tony Robbins CD. I mean, this is 21 years ago, so we still had CDs back in the day. And that CD changed my life. Tony said, I might be butchering it, but Tony said something to the fact that most people fail for the simple reason they don't learn the right skills necessary to succeed. They don't learn the right skills. Now, he goes on to say, everybody is really taught skills, but people who fail are the ones who are not taught the right ones. And I'm like, it was like a light bulb went off in my head that maybe what the company was training me, and maybe what they were saying for me to learn from what I call now the old sales gurus, maybe they just weren't the right skills. Maybe they just were outdated and didn't work very well anymore. Okay. So at the same time, I was in college and my major was behavioral science and human psychology. So I was learning from my professors that the most persuasive way to communicate was here, whereas all the sales gurus were saying it was here. So I'm like, they were completely at odds with each other. So I'm like, how do I take what I'm learning from behavioral science, human psychology, the way the brain works, the way human beings make decisions and or don't make decisions, okay? How do I take that into sales and have a process where I can get prospects to pull me in rather than me pushing them. Because as we know, human being 101, human behavior 101, when we push somebody, what do most people typically do back?
Right, they push back or they back away. Yeah.
Exactly. That's just, we trigger that fight or flight mode. Okay. So I went from like hardly making any money in sales, like being last on the totem pole. Within 1 year from that date, the number one salesperson in the entire country in that industry, which had like 15 to 20,000 salespeople in the United States. Okay. I went on to be ranked before I started 7th level 3 years ago. I was ranked number 45 in the world by the Direct Selling Association as a top salesperson in any industry in the entire United States. Okay. I was making multiple 7 figures a year at my job as a W-2 salesperson. But 20 years before, because I didn't have the right skills, I almost quit. So that's the point of it. Okay. Who cares? Like if once you have the right skills, it doesn't matter if you're 3 feet tall. It doesn't matter if you're an alien from Mars. It doesn't matter if your hair's cool, you have no hair. It doesn't matter your religion, who you are, your gender. None of that matters. All that matters are your skill level and your sales ability. And once you have that, you can be successful with anything you want to communicate. You with me?
I am. And it's interesting, Michael Port in his book Solid, makes the comment that sales isn't about coercion or twisting somebody's arm. It's about meeting them where they are. And if they have a problem and you have a solution, it's, to your point, very collaborative in nature. That's the way that it works. And I think that's the slimy part of sales is when people are overselling, that old school selling, you can see it from 3 miles away. And by the time you get up close, like I know that when it happens to me and I'm on the receiving end, I've already said no, whether I like the product or service or not, because I don't like the tactics. The tactics turn me off.
Somebody could call you from the state, whatever office is called, that you won the $100 million lottery. And by the way they're communicating, you could literally go into fight or flight mode and cut them off. And they were just calling you to say, you won $110 million, Michele. We need to send you the bank wire, which right. And you wouldn't know, right? Because of the way they're communicating. I think that's one thing that all of us have heard, that, people go into fight or flight mode. I think most of us in the sales world have heard like, oh, hey, people go into fight or flight mode and try to get rid of you. But does anybody know why that happens? Does anybody know how you're actually triggering the prospect to go into fight or flight mode by the way you're communicating? So one thing that we have to understand is just kind of behavioral science 101, that within the first 7 to 12 seconds of any sales conversation you're in. So that's whether somebody walks into your store, if you have a storefront, that's whether you call somebody, that's whether you meet somebody in person, that's whether you have a phone call. It really does not matter. Your prospects subconsciously are picking up on social cues from you. Now, we cannot help that as a human being. Subconsciously, it's just where our brain goes, okay? So we are picking up your verbal and nonverbal cues based on that person's tonality and what they are saying and or asking. That triggers our brain to react in one of 2 ways. And you hit it right on the head a minute ago with what you said, how people just try to get rid of you or they argue. So if you come across like assumptive, if you come across really needy, like you need the sale, if you come across attached and you don't know the right questions to ask, it triggers the human brain to, like we said, go into fight or flight mode, where we try to get rid of you fast, where the prospect tries to get rid of you and they say, hey, I'm good. Or, I'm not really looking for anything right now. I'm just out looking, or I'll get with you if I need it, or I'm too busy. Can you call me back later? Or we don't need it right now. Thanks for your time. Or we really want to think it over. Can you just send us a quote or proposal right before you've even talked to them? That's fight or flight mode. Now, when we learn how to work with human behavior, when we come across in our conversations more neutral, like we're unbiased, we're not quite sure we can even help yet because I don't even know what the situation is. How could I know? If we come across more calm, like collective, if we come across, especially, I like to use the word detached. So we're detached and we ask the right questions, it triggers the brain to become curious enough where the other person actually wants to engage with us. They want to open up to us because they feel like we might have something important for them. So we have to learn how to come across more detached from the expectations of making the sale, and instead focus on whether or not they even have a problem that we can even help. Now, do I mean when you get into a conversation or a call or someone walks in the store that you shouldn't make a sale? No, of course I do not mean that. But what I mean is you have to keep that to yourself, because the moment the prospect feels that you are just there selling them something is the moment they do what? They start to emotionally shut down. Like you said, I've already decided no matter how great it is, I'm not going to buy, because you emotionally shut down by the way they triggered you. That was a triggered response from them that caused you to think that way.
You know, what's interesting too. So part of my sales process is I have a discovery call and I have an application for a discovery call, and the application asks questions so that I can even look to see, are we even the beginning of a fit? And right. And the truth, I mean, the 100% truth of the matter is I'm very relational in my selling, and I don't want to work with everybody. I can't solve the problems of the entire world. I have a subset of problems that I am perfectly suited to solve. And so on that call, I am truly thinking the entire time, is this the right fit? My sales process or my coaching process is a year. Can I work with this person for a year? Am I the right fit? And there are many times that I have said to the person, I don't think the timing's right, and I'm not even going to offer a sale, right? We're not even going to move forward right now because I know that it's not right. Or I know that the problem and the challenge they have actually could be solved by somebody else better than I can solve it. And I am 100% open to doing that. But the ones that I know that I can solve and that we are a good fit, I don't have a problem saying it. And I think that also, and it opens up, people are willing to talk to me then, because I'm still going to talk to them and help them and try to discover what the real problem is. It's like going to the chiropractor when what you really need is a knee doctor for something else. Like, I want to make sure that when they come to me, that I'm not selling them what they don't need just so I can rack up. It's miserable.
It doesn't help you in the long run, right? You actually lose business, you lose your brand, you lose reputation. But I would probably, I'm going to ask, like, sometimes when you turn down those people, they probably say like, well, how can you work with me? What can we do together? Or they refer somebody else to you because they start to view you as an authority, an expert, because only experts or authorities in that subject matter can turn away people. Desperate salespeople take anyone, and they know that, right?
Right.
So typically you make way more business. Like, I sold in 4 industries in my almost 17-year sales career. 2 of them are in the B2B space, 2 in B2C. And, one of the B2B spaces I sold in was like debt relief services to like Fortune 500 and Fortune 1000 companies. And there would be some, Fortune 500 companies where there legitimately was nothing we could do for them. But then they would be like, well, how can you work with this? Like, we would tell them like, hey, based on what you're telling me, there's not much we can really do for you. So, there might be some better options that we can point to. And they're like, whoa, wait a minute. Like, don't go. Like, is there something you can do for us? Because when you're basically admitting that, hey, I'm not quite sure we could even help. It's like they want to pull you in rather than most of these pushy salespeople that try to push, and they just push back, and just, the sales cycle delays and nothing ever happens.
And that's the thing I think I love about just an approach in general is there's a discovery aspect. There's not a walking in saying, I'm going to sell to you regardless of what you need. I'm going to come in and discover what you need, where the pain points are. So talk to us a little bit about this, Jeremy. You made the comment at the beginning that maybe they think they have one problem, and as you talk to them, you uncover 4 or 5. I know that is so true in my discovery calls. And I think what's interesting, of course, the podcast is called Profit is a Choice. But I think that people sometimes, when they have a need or a problem, they don't even understand the cost of continuing to live and work with that problem, as compared to the cost of getting help and assistance to solve it. Is that part of the process that you bring up? Is what is it costing you to stay where you are?
Yeah, I mean, that would be like what we would call in our methodology. So our methodology is NEPQ. It stands for Neuro Emotional Persuasion Questioning. Okay. Yeah, sure. We can do that. I think, here, I'm going to break it down like this in 3 different ways so everybody can kind of understand the world of communication according to like psychology and behavioral science. Okay. So remember, I was in college, right? So behavioral science, human psychology, that's pretty much the only thing I know. Like if you asked me to go change these light bulbs up here, I'd be like, I'm not sure I could do that. I'd have to get somebody, but that subject, I know what to do. So according to behavioral science, okay, there are 3 forms of communication, 3 forms. All right. And so everybody listening, unless you're driving down the road, write these down, because once you understand where you're at in your current sales ability compared to where you actually could be, and I don't care if you're already doing well, once you understand where you could be, it will completely change everything for you and your company. So the first mode of communication, we call that ERA, E-R-A, ERA 1 type of sales would be more like boiler room selling. Okay, everybody, when I say boiler room selling, what's the first image that comes into your mind, right? Probably like Wall Street, people on the phones, banging it out, manipulating people. So we're the least persuasive when we tell people things, or we attempt to dominate them, or posture them, or manipulate them, or push them into doing something we want them to do. So when you think of boiler room selling, most people say when I'm at events, they're like, oh, Wolf on Wall Street, right? Like the movie Wolf on Wall Street. That's how they portray it anyways. Okay. I don't know, those people, but that's how it's portrayed. So, hey, I got a great opportunity for you. And then we talk about the features and benefits of why they need to go with us. And then we push and tell them why we have the best over the competitors. And it's just like if you tell your spouse that they really, really need to do something for you, and then you push, what do they typically do back?
They don't do it.
Push back. They don't do it. They push back. It's just human behavior 101. So I'll give you a few examples of the least persuasive way to sell. Okay. Presenting. Okay, we're all taught that you have to have an amazing presentation, these, hour and a half slide decks of how great your services are. And we've got the best this and we've got the best that, which, by the way, doesn't every single salesperson or business owner say they have the best product or service? How many salespeople or how many business owners say, yeah, our service is the 5th best in the market? No one does. Now, you don't have to tell them that. You just keep that to yourself. All right. Everybody says they have the best. So when your prospects hear that, and especially when you talk down about your competition, psychologically, prospects actually trust you far less. Why? Because they're used to every salesperson who's ever tried to sell them something for decades saying the same thing. So according to the data, it's not very persuasive if your presentation is more than 10% of the entire sales conversation and process. Most salespeople and business owner, it's about 50%. Has to be lowered down to about 10. Okay. Telling your story. Hate to tell you this. Nobody cares about your story when you're selling 1-to-1. Whose story do they mostly care about? Their story, right? Mm-hmm. It's just basic stuff. Giving a sales pitch. We've all been taught you got to give a great pitch. But according to the science, very low on the persuasive pole. Like, have you ever watched like Shark Tank on CNBC?
All the time.
Yeah. So take a look when the entrepreneurs, the excited entrepreneurs come out, and there's Damon John and Barbara, and there's Mr. Wonderful and Mark Cuban and Kevin, and they rotate the guests. But watch how when they come out and they're all excited and they're pitching, take a look at the shark's body language. They're like, whoa, they just turned off. They're like, it's just like, it's too much, right? We have shirts for our clients now that say #ditch the pitch, #ditch the pitch. All right. How about putting sales pressure on people? Do you do that? Or the big one, assuming the sale. So according to the data, very low on the persuasive pole. Hence, that's where the term sales is a numbers game comes from, because you're triggering that. You're triggering it to be a numbers game because you're turning so many people off, especially if you're in more of a complex sound environment, like a lot of your listeners are, that are going to require more than one conversation or more than one call. Okay. Now, that's the first form. Second form of communication, according to behavioral science, is more known as consultative selling. If anybody's ever heard of that, consultative selling, ERA 2. Okay. So we're more persuasive when we attempt to have a discussion. Okay. Consultative selling came out in about the mid 80s, really, with one of the big books on that. It's called Spin Selling by a professor, Neil Rackham.
I have it. Yep.
It's groundbreaking in the early 1980s, where he taught, you need to ask logical based questions to find out the needs of the client. But what's a potential downfall of the approach when you only ask logical-based questions? We call those surface-level questions, where your prospect's only going to give you surface-level answers in return. They're never going to go below the surface of what's really going on. And do people make major buying decisions on logic or emotion? Brain studies show it's 100% emotion. There's really no debate at this point. I mean, studies show us that now. So I'll give you a few examples of some consultative questions that trigger sales resistance. You never want to ask these. You never want to get into a call like they used to teach you and say, how's it going today? How's your day going, John? Because they know you don't care how their day's going. They know what you're doing, okay? Typically, especially if you're talking to an A-type personality that triggers resistance, they're like, hey, just get to the point, right? They know you're not genuinely interested in how their day is going, okay? Or how about this one? So Sally, tell me, what's keeping you awake at night? Or can you tell me 2 problems that you have? Or who besides you would be involved in this decision? Okay. Now, if you're selling, I don't know if any of your listeners, I don't know if they're selling mainly to consumers or if they're selling interior design stuff to companies. But if you're selling interior design, I know a lot of your listeners do that.
Most of them are going to be to the consumer. Most of these are home-based, in the home, selling to a husband and a wife or a family.
Okay. So business to consumer, you wouldn't really ask who's going to be involved in the decision. You would just bring both of them in. But let's say you have a listener on here that sells interior design to a company, okay? Because the average company in the United States has about 6 decision makers or influencers that are going to decide on that decision, okay? So instead of saying who besides you would be involved in the decision, because most people like in a company like, oh, no, I can do it, even though they don't really have the decision-making authority, you'd relanguage that and you'd say, can you walk me through your company's decision-making process when it comes to solving problems like this? Walk me through your company's decision-making process. Well, I need to get Betty over in human resources. I need to talk to Jim over in this department. Okay. So it gets them thinking. All right. All right. So those are consultative questions. Now, more persuasive than the first mode of telling your story, putting sales pressure on them and assuming the sale. But the problem is you're still playing the numbers game because very little emotion is brought out by simply asking logical-based surface-level questions. So if you're just asking them, like, let's say you're in interior design and you're asking them like, okay, what's the square footage of your home? What's this? What's that? See, those are just logical-based questions. You have to find that out in the front, like on the front end, but you got to go below the surface and find out really why they're even looking in the first place. Like what's behind the why, not just why they're looking, but what's behind the why, what's driving that. That's where emotion is brought out. Okay. It doesn't matter what you sell. Now, third mode of communication. Okay. Which is called dialogue. That's Era 3 type of sales. It's called dialogue. So we're the most persuasive when we allow others to persuade themselves, to pull you in. That's dialogue when we ask what we call neuro-emotional persuasion questions, NEPQ. Now, the key here is where do we use certain questions and techniques that work with human behavior to get that prospect to pull us in rather than us trying to push them forward? Can we just say, hey, Linda, this has been great conversation. Go ahead and persuade yourself and you can make the checkout, 6YZ LLC company, and we'll get started tomorrow. Great. You can't do that. You have to learn specific skilled questions and then when and how to ask them in a step-by-step structure that will get your prospect to sell themselves rather than you trying to do it. Make sense? All that scientific weird stuff?
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting because we are in this industry, whether we're selling window treatments or we're selling design services, by and large, we're not doing any cold calling, right? They are coming to us. They are calling us. They're filling out forms. They're telling us. And it's interesting because we've talked about it in a lot of the classes that I've taught, that we're not really selling them a sofa or a table or a chair. We're selling them how they want to feel in that space, how they want to entertain in that space. We're selling them on the emotion, exactly what you said. And it shows up by the things that we do in that space for them. And if we can connect them to the emotion and the outcome that they want at the end, how do they want to feel? How do they want to be? Where's the emotion? Where's that track? And then what is it that we can put there? That's right. That's right.
Like selling, you're not selling them the thing. I love how you said,
no, it's
you're
not the
selling
thing.
them the sofa. You're not selling them the bar down in the basement. You're not selling them the new kitchen stuff there. I mean, that's not what you're selling. You're selling them the results of what that's going to do for them. Really what you're selling is you're helping them solve an emotional need, right?
I'll give you a couple of prime examples, the way that I have framed it in my own coaching. If you had a woman who had just lost her spouse and she called you in and said, I need to redo the bedroom, what is it that we're really giving her?
Yeah.
Because we're not just giving her a bed and a new comforter and new winter treatments.
Yeah.
We're giving her hope that she's going to make it. We're giving her something new to look at. If you're selling to a pregnant mom standing in an empty room with a baby on the way, we're not selling her a crib. We're selling her that baby doesn't care what that room is going to look like. It has no care in the world. It doesn't be like, all right, Mom, I guess the nursery's ready. I can come now. Like it doesn't care. So we're selling something different than what we think. And if we go in, if we go in thinking it's about the elements that we are putting into the space, we're going to miss it.
Yeah, you're selling them that fulfillment emotional need. For one mother, that nursery might be, you're selling her social status because her friends come in and see that, and she wants to compete with those nurseries that her friends have. So for one mother, it might be social status. For the next mother, she wants it to be warm and she wants it to be like homey feeling. That's what you're selling. You're not selling a crib. And that's what I was at a training event a few months ago, and somebody in the audience said, hey, Jeremy, if you could describe selling in one word, what would that word be? And it took me about 4 or 5 seconds. And I'm like, change. Selling is just change, right? It's about how good you are at helping your prospect or your potential customer view in their mind that by changing their situation, that means paying for your services and getting what they want is far less risky for them than them doing nothing at all, staying in the status quo. Their problems stay the same and nothing ever changes. So whether they're wanting something better or they're trying to get away from some pain, it's just about change. Now, here is the problem that all of you need to understand. Human beings do not like change, even though they say they do. So on one hand, selling is about change, but on the other, human beings don't like change. And why do we not like change as humans? Because it makes us feel uncomfortable and unsettled, especially when it's initiated by some pushy person that's ready to pitch their services within the first 10 seconds of meeting that person. So human behavior shows that we value something that is more consistent and something that is more familiar, even if we don't like it that much. So like you said, and I loved it, we're not selling the thing. We're selling the results of what that thing is going to do for them. And once you start to understand that, everything can really open up to you as a business owner or a sales professional for sure.
I think what's also interesting is understanding. I love what you said about selling is change. And it does create an uncomfortableness and an unsettledness. But I think sometimes if we can also tap into that, the first time it's uncomfortable, but the second time you kind of know what that uncomfortable is going to be. Like, for example, I've had 2 children. I didn't know the first time how uncomfortable I was going to be, but I had an idea the second time. It still was new and different, but I knew what I was signing up for. I knew I could make it through. And part of sales as well is, I believe, telling them, I understand that this change is going to cause uncomfortableness and unsettledness. And I've walked this before, and I've helped other people manage this change. And our product or our service or whatever we're doing, we're here to help you manage the change. I mean, it's like, can we help you manage the change?
It's like you're asking, like, okay, but what if you don't do anything about this?
Right. What is the cost?
What are the ramifications if you don't do about this and the situation gets even worse? Like, what happens then? And that gets them to realize it's far less risky to get your services and have what they want than them trying to have all this pain and figuring it out on their own and wasting months of their time, and then they don't get the end result they want, right? Which is more risky.
Well, and I think asking them the question, how long have you lived like this?
Yeah.
And how much longer are you willing to live like this, right? Sometimes that...
Yeah, so tell me one big problem that let's just say your services solves. When you go in, homeowner wants some interior decorating and stuff, what's one problem in your mind that you solve for them? Like, why would they come to you?
As an interior designer, they would come to them simply because they don't know how to put together the proper elements and items to make it look completed. So that includes the color, the scale, the proportion, the texture, all of that thing. So, Jeremy, what they do, just to give you a quick idea, they'll go out onto Pinterest, or they'll look on Facebook, or they'll look on social media, and they see all these beautiful things, and they don't know how to curate that for their own home. They want it, but they don't know how to get it.
But if they don't hire you, what are the consequences of that?
Yeah. So the consequences of that would be they're buying things that are too small, too big, wrong color, can't find it, can't get it, the cost of the mistakes and what they can't, take back. So they literally will spend more money on making the wrong selections and their time. I think that's one of the big things in the interior design world is the homeowner says, I can handle these things, I'll do it. And they don't even account for how much time it's going to take out of their day and everything else that they're doing.
And it's almost asking like, well, how long have you been trying to handle it yourself?
Yeah.
Oh, for the past 5 years.
Right.
Do you want to go another 5 years trying to do that? Or would you rather have somebody come in who could actually do it in the next 4 months or whatever it is? Right.
Exactly.
So so that's like, they don't know what they don't know until you ask certain questions that allow them to think differently than they've thought before, right? Asking certain questions allow them to question their way of thinking that's allowed this problem to keep happening. That's the key. Hey, and if you're, before I forget, because I forget half the time on these shows, any of your listeners, if they want some of those questions that they can use for like different scenarios that they might be in with a homeowner or with somebody they're talking with, they're always welcome to get some free resources from us at that Facebook group I gave you guys. It's, they can just go to salesrevolution.pro. And then right when they join the Facebook group, I think that about 18,000 or so different sales professionals and entrepreneurs and others sell many different things. But right when they join, just have them check their Facebook messages, like in Messenger, and somebody on my team will message them over a free training called the NEPQ 101 mini course by my CEO, Matt Ryder. And it'll just be like a list of different questions that they can just use in different sales situations that they're going to find themselves if they want to sell more. So they're welcome to have that if they want.
I'm curious, you had mentioned like era 1, era 2, era 3, the different changes in spin selling back in the I don't remember what
80s, which is like 40-something years ago.
Isn't it funny?
That was 40 years ago.
I got the book on my shelf. I love all the books. The listeners can't see this, but you have like all kinds of like, I could dig that space. I've got a space just like it over here. Books. Yeah, I'm a pretty avid reader and I love them. But so talk to us a little bit, Jeremy, about the changes in selling, because let me say this. From an interior design perspective, from a home furnishings perspective, we can broaden it even to that. People have so much more access to things now in an online environment. They can look it up. I had a client the other day her client came to her and said, oh yeah, I reverse searched everything you sent to me and I can find it here and I can do this. And she's like, whoa. So selling is changing. We can't do like even home sales. I worked in software for 10 years. Software sales is a very different thing. That very corporate way of old selling is not going to work when I walk into the home with a mom and I'm trying to sell her window treatments or I'm trying to help design a room. It's a whole different thing. I am in a private, personal space. There is so much emotion attached to it. It's just a very different sales technique. And now let's move forward. I don't even want to count how many years from the 80s because I like to think it's 20 and it's really not. But 40 something years from the 80s and selling is shifting again. And do you see another wave of a change in sales coming?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, the old school sales techniques are going to be harder and harder and harder for you to get by on using. I'm just telling you, like you're going to go from average to like way below average. Because like you said, because of the power of the internet and especially social media, your prospects know they have many choices to choose the exact product services that you're offering. Okay. All they have to do is go to their smartphone, type in that information. They know all about your company. They know about your price points. They know who your competitors are. Just like you, they know where to get the same thing you're offering, maybe for a different rate. Now, maybe they don't know what they don't know, though. Maybe it's not the same, but they don't know that, right? So, it's something that we call, one of our clients, his name's Brandon Kane. It's a really good book. It's called Hook Point, How to Stand Out in a 3-Second World. So he's a big Hollywood influencer. He does all of like Taylor Swift's social media and Rihanna's and MTV's. But anyway, so he has a program that teaches people in any industry how to brand their business. Okay. So in his book, Hook Point, he says that there are over 3 billion content creators every day trying to take attention away from your prospects. You are even competing with 13-year-olds on TikTok. Okay. Just trying to pull attention away. How many content creators do you think there were 22 years ago in 2000? Less than 1 million. Now there are over 3 billion and growing. Okay. And like I said, that's because of the information age we live in and the power of the internet and social media. Your prospects are being sold to 24 hours a day, 7 days a week after week, month after month, year after year. I said that at an event one time, like, no, I'm not being sold to all the time. I'm like, really? I want you to think about it. You wake up in the morning. What's the first thing you do? You get on your phone, you get on Facebook or IG or TikTok, and what do you see? Ads trying to sell you something. You walk into the kitchen. You're like, oh my gosh, I've got to get to work. I've got a client I've got to meet with, or I've got to get in the office. You turn on the TV while you're getting your coffee, and what do you see? Commercials trying to sell you something, right? You get into the car, you've got to drive to a client's office or whatever you're going. You turn on the radio. What do you hear? Ads trying to sell you something. You drive down the road, you're looking around. Oh, everything looks, I got to go shopping over here. You see billboards doing what? Trying to sell you something. You're at lunch, you're sitting there at Starbucks or whatever, getting a coffee. You get back on social media, and then you see your aunt trying to push her latest, greatest MLM opportunity. See, people are trying to sell you something 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Okay. So if we want to stand out as a business owner or sales professional or whatever you're doing, we have to, we have this in this new book we're publishing now, but we have to become, in our minds and in the prospect's mind, what we call problem finders and problem solvers, not product pushers. Okay. So like we talked about a little bit ago, most people don't even know what they need when we first start talking to them. And think about it in this way. I'll give you the best analogy I can. Let's say you wake up this morning and you have a massive headache and you're like, oh my gosh, my head hurts so bad. I need to go to urgent care and I need to get some medication because I've got a really bad headache. And that's what you think you need. So you're like, okay, my copay is $50. I'll pay $50. They're going to give me some medication that costs me $10 with my insurance. It's going to be $60. I need to solve my migraine. That's what you think you need. You go to the doctor and they start asking you some questions. How long that headache has been there. Okay. And they're asking you about the symptoms and what type of pain you're feeling and how long and what that pain is doing to you. And suddenly you start to realize from the doctor's questioning that you might have a bigger problem than you thought you had originally. And oh, by the way, they said we might need to do a CAT scan, and they do a CAT scan. And all of a sudden the results come back the next day that you have a terminal tumor in your brain. And oh, by the way, if they don't operate within the next 30 days, you could die. And oh, by the way, that surgery is $1 million and your insurance is only going to cover 80%. So now you have to come up with $200,000. You thought your budget was going to be 60 because you thought you had a migraine and you needed some medication. But then because of the questioning skills, you now realize you need $200,000 or you're going to die. So most people don't understand what they need when we first start talking to them. And it's only your questioning skills that allow them to see what they really need to go from where they are. We call that their current situation or current state compared to where they really want to be. We call that their objective state. Now, what's the gap in between? It can only be determined by your questioning ability that allows them to see how big that gap is. And the bigger the gap that is from your questioning, not by you telling them, that goes in one ear out the other, but by your questions allowing them to tell themselves what they need, the bigger that gap, the more urgency there is for them to act now and do that with you.
Yeah.
You with me?
It's absolutely true. If they don't see the need, don't see the problem, then they don't feel an urgency to act to fix it. Like, why would we solve a problem we don't have?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And they're willing to spend way more because the gap is way bigger in their mind only because of your questioning ability and your listening ability and your tonality ability. And that is all a learnable skill. No one is born out of their mother's womb having advanced questioning skills and tonality skills.
I don't know. I might fight back on that one, Jeremy, because as a 3-year-old, my son's only word, why? He had some questioning skills that drove me nuts for a while. My dad said that I deserved that one, but it was
that is true.
That was tough.
My daughter's 3.5, and she's like, "But why?" And I'll answer, "But why?"
Yeah,
but
you
why?
can't go deep enough with that why.
I'm like, just because.
Exactly.
Thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. And I will put in the show notes the Facebook group and lead everybody there. And I really appreciate your time today.
Hey, thanks very much. And let us know if there's anything we can do for you. Okay.
We'll do it. Thanks. Thank you, Jeremy, for joining the podcast. Becoming great at asking the right questions takes time and dedication to really understand the problem that you and your company are solving. People need to see that gap that they need to fill between where they are and where they want to go, and recognize the need that they have, and then be willing to engage in the change necessary. They also need to see you as the trusted advisor to bring about that change with the solution that you have. This is a profitable sales approach. If you want to talk through the gap that you have in your interiors business between where you currently are and where you want to go, I would love to talk to you. So sign up for a discovery call on my website at scarlettthreadconsulting.com. We would love to see if we can help solve your problems and move you closer to where you envision your business to be. Make a choice to be profitable, because profit doesn't happen by accident. Profit is a Choice is proud to be part of the designnetwork.org, where you can discover more design media reaching creative listeners. Thanks for listening, and stay creative and business minded.